welcome to the ARWP podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the ARWP podcast. I'm your co-host Eric Novak, and today we have a special guest. The Cruiser. Alright guys, welcome to the ARWP podcast, the All Real Wrestling podcast. I'm your co-host Eric Novak, and today we have a special guest. The biggest guest, in my opinion, we could ever have on this podcast. He is the Cruiserweight, the Phil and Flash, the best technical wrestler in the game today, the Wrestling Yoda, and my good friend, TJP.
Hey, what's going on, Eric? Thank you for having me.
Of course, I have seen so many of your interviews. I have so many questions. I will not bring up the Cruiserweight Classic, where you signed with WWE, where you're not, because I feel like you answered that way too many times. So what I really want to know in the beginning is, how did your wrestling career start? Can you tell me the path that you took, the choices that you made, the big shows that really made you where you are now, like the choices that made you go to Japan, choices that made you go to Mexico, all that?
I've said before a lot of times that I don't have like a WrestleMania moment like in mind, like when I was growing up. I mean, obviously I was a WWF fan, and of all the wrestling, I was like a huge WWF kid, so it's not to say like I wasn't, but in regards to wanting to be a wrestler, I never thought like being at WrestleMania was like not my goal. So like when I was starting, and even now, like what would be WrestleMania moments for other people, for me, it was like, I want to go to Arena Mexico. I want to go to the Tokyo Dome or like Korakuen Hall and things like that, because a lot of what was really capturing my imagination was a lot of stuff from around the world. And like New Japan, CMLL were two of the primary things, which the craziest thing is that was like ended up being the first two things that I ended up doing as when I kind of got out of Los Angeles. So, I mean, that's really what kind of guided my decision. But honestly, I mean, the path kind of just took shape on its own. Like I wanted those things, but I wasn't really aiming for them, because at the time, you got to remember, this was 22 years ago, like social media and all kinds of things like that, like Google, YouTube, all this stuff was not around. The internet was like barely a thing yet. So there wasn't really a way to kind of formulate a plan to get to like a New Japan, to get to like CMLL. You kind of, it either had to happen or not. It was like really rare to get to those places. That's why like at the time, it was like you only heard of guys doing that. Like there's only handfuls of guys that you would hear that really did all that sort of stuff, like your Owen Harts and your Jerichos, your Benoits, your Guerreros, your Malenkos. Like there wasn't like a lot of guys that were like going to all these places, because it wasn't an easy thing to do. You almost had to just be really lucky. And in my opinion, I was just really lucky.
All right. Can you tell us like your first match, the first experience you had in the wrestling ring, and who your opponent was, if you remember, or where the arena was?
Yeah, I was in this theater in Pomona, California. They used to have, I think it was called the Fox Theater. I might be mixing up the theater names, but it was a theater in Pomona, and it was like where you would see like the Nutcracker or something like that, like a ballet. Mm-hmm. And it was all really old and run down, and like kind of like it looked like it was abandoned on the inside. Like there was they didn't use it as a theater anymore, but it was still open for business, I guess, to a certain extent, because obviously wrestling was running there. But they would have this lucha card that they would have regularly. I want to say it was like Friday nights, but I'm not sure exactly the day. But yeah, in this Pomona theater, they would have these lucha libre cards, and some of the guys, there was like really like lower level, like local stuff. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of like this old ancient looking theater. The ring is right up against the stage. You entered from like the back, like from like the venue lobby, basically. So you would be like entering down the aisle where you would walk to find your seat if you were like watching like a play or something. And so I remember the locker rooms were upstairs. You had to kind of go downstairs right into the foyer, just like if you were like a fan. It was just like very like kind of off on the fly, like set up the way that they would do it. It was very like informal. And a lot of the guys from the gym that I started at would go to these local cards like this, especially with like the Mexican wrestling cards, because like guys were coming in and out of these places like less. They didn't have like a regular crew as much as like some of the other local indies would have. So it was a really easy way to like kind of go in and get extra matches. And so like some of the guys who had yet to debut, for example, like at the wrestling school that I started at, or maybe they just did debut, but you know, they're trying to get more matches or something under their belt, they would go to these cards and you know, they would have typically like 3 or 4 matches announced. All of them are like 6-man. So there's a lot of guys that are getting on the show. And then there would be like, you know, 1 or 2 matches that were not announced that they would just kind of fill that spot with whoever was around. Mm. That's usually kind of like how a Lucha Libre card is built, like is like a 5-match card. And, you know, it'd be like 3 matches in intermission and then 2 more matches. And usually the first couple matches out of the gate, they would just kind of throw guys together. And so I would just start riding with guys when I knew that they would go to get extra matches. And I was, you know, kind of ready to do matches, I think, like just within a couple weeks of starting my training. Like they were already kind of like having me run through matches. So, you know, I knew they would go to these cards and I went out to tag along and they just threw me in. It was just a 6-man tag. I don't remember who the opponents were. And I, except for one of them was a guy from the training school that I started at. So like one of us was on the other team and I was on, you know, the team that I was on. And I didn't know the other, like 4 dudes that were in there with us. And mostly I just took an ass kicking and, and, you know, that was that. I remember that was like where, you know, they were concerned I looked so young. And I had always wanted to wear a mask, but just, you know, at that time, especially again, like with no like internet and things like that, like it wasn't easy to get gear made, you know, unless you had to kind of like know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, that sort of thing. So I had like kind of a bad costume, so to speak, but I didn't have a mask and I'd want to get one made eventually, but they were concerned I was so young. So that started the trends that day of they would just kind of get any mask from the concessions table where they would have like replica masks and stuff. And for a while, every time I would wrestle, I would just have somebody else's mask. It was just some like, you know, one day I would be wearing like I think I had I actually have the first mask I ever wrestled in.
Oh, it's
awesome. Up on the wall
because
awesome. He's a very famous wrestler. So if you look up here, the clown mask, it's like black, golden, and black, and it has stars over the eyes. Yeah, that's really Super Muñeco, and he's a very like long time wrestler in Mexico, and that was the first match. They just had one, and they're like, you need to wear a mask because you're too young. And every match I would do, they would just go grab somebody's mask, and I would wear that, just one and done for a while.
Wow, that's awesome. I actually never saw that mask ever. There's no photo or anything. Do you have any photos of that mask? Like
I have a photo of it somewhere that I can't find. It was like an actual picture, like that had to be like developed and stuff, and like at like a Kmart. But I don't know where it is, and it was just of me kind of, I think, coming back to the locker room afterward, and and then I have another one. I think it was not of that particular match. Maybe like the next week after, I had somebody else's mask on. And I have a picture of me standing in the corner, like kind of like really awkward because, you know, I was a skinny kind of short kid. So I'm just kind of standing there holding the ropes and, you know, in the mask, same costume, just different mask.
All right. Well, that's awesome. It's awesome here. I never even knew about that mask. Wow. That's crazy. Tell me more about your first experience in Japan, because that's like far away from home, you know, so that must have been really, you know, a lot to take in, you know, a lot to learn and people you had to learn from. Some of your experience in New Japan.
God, like, I think the best way to describe that was kind of like, like a guy like Kobe Bryant getting drafted into the NBA right out of high school, because it was just like I was 17 and finishing my last year of high school, and that summer I started being recruited by New Japan. So I became a young boy in the gym that they had in LA. They set up the first New Japan dojo in LA. That was in 2002. And so I was finishing up my last year of high school while starting to go there. And then, I graduated and then spent the summer going there every day. And then like right when I turned 18 at the end of the summer in September, they said, okay, well, we can process a visa for you and send you over. So it was just crazy, because it's like, I'm sitting on this like business class flight going over to New Jersey, and I know that I have like a Cork and Hall and like Tokyo Dome, and it's like tour contract, and like it's this big deal. And not in the wrestling world, it's not a big deal, but like for me, it's a big deal. And it's a huge change of speeds, because, like just a couple months before that, I was literally sitting in English class, and, I was just like very much a kid. And then now, like, fast forward just like weeks and months later, and now I'm going to do this thing. And so it's like kind of a culture shock, because, you land and they hand you like $1,000 in Japanese cash, and then like they're taking you to your like hotel and checking you in and getting all this paperwork process, putting you out on these big shows, and it kind of comes real fast. And then you're hopping tour buses and checking into hotels, and it's really crazy. I'd obviously been wrestling for 3 or 4 years at that point already, but it's still like, it's not the same thing, because now it's like you're at like the tippy top now, like you're like at the upper level. So it's kind of crazy to go from that to that. So I like to compare it to that, because it's kind of like, if you're a guy like Kobe or something like that, or like LeBron, you're playing basketball in high school gyms in front of 50 people one day, and the next day you're at Staples Center, or the Great Western Forum, and it's totally different, So, it took a while. And like, for me, I'm kind of a late bloomer. So it took me a while to kind of mature and to kind of like grow into that, to being an adult,
Mm-hmm. No, I couldn't find the full matches, but like when you first got into, Evolve around that time, I saw a lot of your matches against Kenny Omega, match against, I believe, Tiger Mask. It was during the Cup, I remember. You were in one of the Cups. Forgot which one it was.
Best of the Super Juniors, yeah.
Best of the
that was that one, yeah.
Were you supposed to be in this one this year? Were you supposed to be in that?
Yeah.
Because I saw you retweeted it, so I was like, is she going to be a part of it?
Yeah, I would have been. So I know they announced the cancellations. I was hoping that like maybe when everything starts opening up, that they might still try to do like the G1 and the Super G, like the bigger, more notable tournaments. Like they might jump back into those just to kind of still have those, but who knows? It might be canceled like totally for this year, but which would be a bummer because that would have been a lot of fun. And same thing with the Madison Square Garden show. Like I was looking forward to that, but obviously they already have a contingency plan for that, so that'll eventually kind of come about. But yeah, that was kind of my culture shock of going to Japan. It was just
Well,
right
we're
out of
not
high
done
school.
with New Japan, because I still want to talk about, after you got released from WWE, you went to New Japan. I saw you at the Hammerstein Ballroom. That was my first New Japan show. I went there because of you. And I want to know what the experience was, being back in New Japan, being with the bigger guys.
That's really why I was wanting to leave WWE. Like I had told them, God, a year before that, that was my primary note. Well, my primary note was that I felt like I was unhappy, but like I wasn't contributing anymore. So I didn't want to be a waste of resources to Vince and to the company. And I told him, I said, look, I'm wasting your money. I don't want to waste your time. Like I'm not happy. If I was happy, then maybe I would be happy wasting your money and time. That'd be different. I think anybody, if you're happy, you get away with whatever you get away with. But I wasn't happy, and like I'm not the type of person that is complacent that way. That kind of goes back to your first question, like what motivates what would have motivated me to go to Japan and Mexico. It's like, it's because I have a hard time being complacent like that. So I'll always want to go somewhere else if I can, or I want to be able to contribute and make a difference, So, my primary thing was, well, if I can't be a commodity here, and if I'm wasting your time and money, then, I want to be able to go and do things that for me is like near and dear to my heart. I feel like WWE is a family, and it is a place that like instantly became a home for me and probably will always be a home for me in some regards. Like, I'll always feel like if I go back, it would feel like I was going home. But my first home was always New Japan and Mexico and like that culture. And so before I went to WWE, when I was leaving TNA previously, I almost didn't stay with WWE after the Cruiserweight Classic because my plan after TNA was to have a few years where I can just be free and go back to Japan, go back to Mexico and all that. And I kind of started laying the groundwork for going back to these places, and I kind of was developing a plan and what I wanted to do. And I mean, WWE just fell in my lap. I didn't intend for that. And I kind of fought it a little bit. Like, they made an offer during the Cruiserweight tournament, and I turned it down at first and told them I really had to think about it. And it was Regal that really kind of talked me into it. Like, you've reached an age, kid, where you should settle down for a little while, make some money and be not complacent, but stay put for a little bit. And so, he kind of talked me into that. But otherwise, I always would want to kind of go back to Japan and Mexico. It's just it'll always be the fondest part of what I do is that part of my career.
As a fan, giving you the fan experience, I did love you in the Cruiserweight Classic. You had that moment that you truly did deserve. From day one, when I saw the announcement of who's going to be a part of it, I was like, I know exactly who that is. I followed you all the way from Impact. And, I was voting for you since day one. I remember that the finals, it was like I was with my friends and we did bet. Everyone bet, they put Zack Sabre Jr., Kota Ibushi. I'm like, God, put me on for TJP. I won. I felt like a really good winner. And, I felt that was the one time in WWE where I actually felt some emotion in wrestling. I don't know why. I never got to a point where I actually teared up during a match, especially one that's like so powerful. So for me, that will always be like the biggest moment. And I think you made the right decision. I think yes, it's good that you signed with WWE, even though we're going to talk about it in a little bit. The Lucha Underground, little information. I want to know a little bit more about that. But did you? So here's my question for you, and it wasn't originally given. I just thought about it while you were talking. You said that you didn't feel like they were using you like truly, and that you couldn't provide much for them at the time. What was going on. How do you think the fans felt with your character? Because you're a great face, you're a great heel, you're great at what you do. But it's like, how do you think the fans felt by you being there? Fans that truly care about you and follow you throughout your career. How do you think they felt when you were in WWE doing matches with Noam Dar, losing in like less than a second, making it just some disappointment stuff, like you giving a whole promo, and this will always be talked about, giving a whole promo while putting someone in a submission, like that.
Those are all just examples of me playing different positions and making what they need to make work, like the Noam match, like that's, to me, that was a big win for me personally, because he needed it at the time, and what we do is emulate real life. In real life, Michael Jordan gets blown out sometimes. The Bulls are going to lose by 30. That just happens, and that's okay. And sometimes you have to reflect that. You can't be perfect all the time, and then you're just Superman, and nobody will find that interesting, So I'm happy to be on the opposite, because I was lucky to win the Cruiserweight thing, for example, 29, 30 other, however many we had it. There's 30 some other guys that have to kind of lay down for me. And so, I'm happy always to be able to do that for somebody else. So stuff like that, I enjoy. And then, the promo thing and stuff, I don't think I'm The Rock. Definitely not. I'm very kind of introverted and shy as a person, but but I think I have a unique way of being able to, I still have those elements in my toolbox, like a way to do those things. And it's just going to be different than other people. And so that was just me being able to explore, like, you know, I do have a talent for talking. it's not going to be how other people are. You know, some guys are like the 80s, like super over the top, and they're going to be in your face and super high energy and blah, 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 blah. And that's not me. And me as a fan, like as a person, I don't find that entertaining. Like, and then some guys are like, you know, CM Punk or like Moxley, and they're these like super like uber reality kind of like pipe bomb type of guys. And as a fan, I don't find that interesting. Mm-hmm. Like I know people do. So I think it's good in regards to everybody else, but like for me, that doesn't appeal to me. Like, mm-hmm. I don't think when I see stuff like that, I tune out, cause I don't think it's cool. Mm-hmm. But then again, what I think is cool, most people don't think is cool, but that's an example of how I would do it my way is like the promo where I wrestled the guy at the same time, or, you know, just different ways I would do, you know, pre-tapes or things like that in the backstage. There's ways that I do it, but it's just unique to me. And it's not for everybody. I understand that, but I don't think I need to be for everybody. I think I just wanted to be different. And I don't know. I mean, I think as far as the way that fans receive it, like it's an odd element to kind of dissect, you know, in some regards. Like there's a lot of people that legitimately hate me, mm-hmm. and they hate me so much they invent stuff about me to hate me further. And to me, that's an example of me having done one part of my job correctly, because they irrationally hate me, but that's what I was trying to create at mm-hmm. a certain point. Before that, my job was to create, you know, love and a connection. And there's a lot of people that irrationally love me too. So I know that was a win. So like the fact that I kind of got both, like to me is a sign I was doing things right. And it was always kind of reaffirmed to me, like, hey, if this is what's happening, you're doing it right. So just stay the course. So I would. And then, you know, the other layer to that is there's some people that kind of try to see through the veil and like see who you really are and all that. And then they go through these ups and downs with you. And for them, I appreciate that they can see that. I think, you know, you yourself are somebody that's in that boat. And then for them, I would just express that, like, when there's things that are perceived as downswings, they're not downswings. It creatively, it may not be what you want, but that's not really what it's about. You know, it's about the journey of making things work. In the movie Moneyball, Brad Pitt's character, he plays Billy Bean. Billy Bean was the GM, or is the GM for the Oakland A's, and he kind of was just as a sidebar. And he's the guy that kind of got into the analytics in baseball and kind of built the A's in a way that now all sports teams sort of build their teams based on analytics. And people didn't believe in his approach in the beginning. That's what the movie's about. But there's a great line, and there's a lot of great lines in it, I think, that are good for like perspective on life. But there's a great line in it towards the end where, you know, he expresses to his partner and his friend, like, I'm not in this to win a championship. I'm not in this because, you know, you get that, and then you got to do it again, and then you got to do it again, and then you got to do it again. So it's not about that for him. It's about, you know, like the whole journey and kind of like changing the way that he approached the game. And if it helps other people, great, you know. And for me, that's what it is. So when you have creative things that look like downswings, or it's like, oh, they're misusing you, that's okay. I don't mind that sort of thing. And I for the people that are really like linked to me, like as far as fans go, I guess I would encourage you guys, don't be so quick to be disappointed, because it has to be like that. You can't win something if, you know, you can't be up here and find joy in this climb if you didn't have anywhere to climb from. So once you get to here, you have to find a way to get back down to here at some point, because you have to climb again. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you just stay up here, and it's like, you eat ice cream every night, it stops being fun. You know, you have to have salad sometimes before you look forward to the ice cream. So, so that's what I would say as far as that.
No, yeah, you know, even if you didn't always get the win, even if it was against like Lucha House Party and you were tag teaming with, you know, Mike Kanellis, you know, even then it's like, it doesn't matter if you win, it's just good to see you win and watch you wrestle. But I hear what you mean, you know, you have to put over guys. It's part of the game. It's part of the company. It's part of the business. So I do want to mention another story. It was actually, and this is again gonna get to like the independent scene now. So we're gonna leave WWE. We're gonna go more into like the afterwards. So I remember it was like a week right before WrestleMania. I just got my WrestleMania access ticket for Saturday, and I get the notice that you were released. I was with my friends too at the same time, and at that moment I didn't know how to feel. Like I wasn't upset because
That's right, because it was New York.
yeah, it was in New York.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, I forgot.
And also like I remember I DM'd you also like a month before like on Twitter. I remember like you said you would be there, but again like that's not your plan. You know what WWE does. That's what they do. You
Oh
didn't
sure,
know.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm moving in, and when I got the notice, I'm like, I don't know if I don't know, I'm not really upset about it because what I do learn from WWE is the fact that it's really hard to meet the wrestlers in WWE. Like unlike you other wrestlers don't just go out and at the end of the show and like take pictures with fans. Like if you were ever in WWE since now, I probably would not have ever met you. It would be probably the most difficult thing to do with 1,000 people in the back, waiting for everyone to come out. So I feel so at that moment I was like, I'm not really that disappointed because he had a great run in WWE, and now I know for a fact I'll see him outside in the independent scene. And since then, I saw you like what 4 times already, 5 times. So it's really.
Well, honestly, like one of the, I don't know, and sometimes it becomes divisive, I guess, but, and honestly, sometimes it breeds contempt with some of my peers, like, unfortunately, but I mean, if they have a problem with that, then they have a problem with it. But like, even when I was in WWE, I was maybe the most accessible person there. Like, I just never saw it as an inconvenience to stop and talk to people like on the way in and out. And I would stay for 30 minutes, maybe an hour if it meant that. And New York was especially a great place for me. Like, I never did the Garden, but I would do Brooklyn a lot. And that was great. I would stay outside, when the bus would pull up and we'd all get out or when we were loading up, and I'd talk to everybody, and everybody was always great in that community there. And they would always tell me like, we know you're an LA boy, but like they would tell me it's like they feel like I'm a New York guy almost. Like they would tell me you have a home here, and I was like, that's so wild to me because it's like oil and water, so to speak, the two coasts. But they were always really, really great to me there. So you definitely would have probably easily been able to cross paths with me. I always tried to make myself accessible.
I went to like 3 events. I went to Raw 25. I went to one of your first matches, like when you first Kendrick, like on Raw. I went to one of those.
Yeah. I remember that.
It's very hard. It was very hard, but look, at least you got the moment would be that will never be replaced. You are the honorable Cruiserweight champion. You were the first ever champion. I'm so proud that you got that. I'm so proud that you went to the WWE, and that's what you deserve. You deserve to have your own name on things. And now every time someone talks about the Cruiserweight, you're the number one person they'll bring up. Like you're just the first ever champion. You held the Cruiserweight. And even back when they didn't give you much to do, even though you pull over other guys, they still said this is the first. Jake Maverick was like, "You're the first Cruiserweight champion. I'll give you an opportunity. I'll give you an opportunity." They always brought up the fact that you were the first, which always made me feel really good about that.
Yeah, I mean, they. I didn't consider myself this, but they would always kind of remind me, like their perception of me was that I was like that guy. Mm-hmm. So like there were times I remember I would kind of show up to the arena and they'd say, "Well, you're on last tonight and you're in this match and these guys are all like qualifying for this or whatever." And I would a lot of times kind of almost be confused. Like I would tell them like, why am I in this match? Like there's other guys that are coming up that I feel like they've been hotter right now and they're like, that's where they should be. Mm-hmm. And I was, I will have been not doing, a lot of great stuff or something at the time. Yeah. But they would always tell me like, well, sometimes it'd be like, well, we felt like this match needed more star power or, we felt this or that. And they would tell me like, when you not like it's like permanent, but in a way it's like you kind of cement yourself at a certain level when you do something like win a title there, Mm-hmm. So like they would always tell me like you're in regards to this group and these guys, you're like you're a top guy for this. So, it's easy to put you in any of these spots. And I never understood that at the time. And I didn't, that was kind of like my way of learning how they perceive things there. So, it was like, I guess it was a really encouraging thing to see that they thought of that of me. But I mean, that's just kind of how it was the entire time. I didn't think much of myself or didn't think that they thought much of me even in the cruiserweight thing. But it was like, that became such a like almost real moment for me, because I knew after the first one that they liked it so much and they were so behind me. Like, I knew I was going to the finals after the first round because they told me. And when they told me, the way that they told me, I kind of knew I was going to win it too. And then the way they would treat me, they kind of like, they babied me the whole time. They treated me like I was a star, like more so than like the other guys around me. And I remember thinking that was weird, because you usually don't get that treatment from them.
Yeah.
I had been in and out with WWE in the past in little times here and there, especially, not being under contract, and they don't just treat anybody like that. So I knew, but it was just weird because I didn't feel like that was my role, and maybe that wasn't the original plan. I don't know. But I do know that like almost from the beginning, that's how they treated me. And it just felt like the more I win, the better it became for me. Like the more it cemented what I meant to them. And I don't mean win like win the matches, because obviously like this is, it's wrestling. It's programmed that way. But I just meant like, if I did well, then that was like a win in my book. And so it was like, the more I did that, the more it was like separated me from the pack. And like, so it felt real. Like, I mean, it felt like I was like in the playoffs in the real sport. It's like, I win and move on. And it's just like, it just felt automatic. I don't know. Only time in my life I've ever been in that role. Usually I'm a support guy. I'm a utility guy. Usually I'm, losing to a Noam Dar in a minute, or like, helping, build another guy up. Like I'm usually like with the Lucha House Party, usually I'm in that role, like kind of supporting a new concept or a new idea or something like that. I've not many other times, other than maybe in TNA with the X Division title and his suicide before. Other than that, like I'm usually not in that position to be like the star, the top guy. And they pretty much designated me that from the start. You're the guy. Like you're Michael Jordan in this. You're winning. Like that's what you're gonna do. And I did, because I can. That's usually not my role. TNA with the X Division thing, it felt the same way actually too, because I don't think they planned on that for me. But
we'll get to that. We'll get to that, because that's like the end for me. Like I have, most of my questions are about Impact. So what I want to understand is, before you signed with WWE, you were doing Evolve shows, you were doing PWG shows, you were doing a lot of, I don't want to say minor stuff, but the things people don't really, if you're not an independent fan, you wouldn't really know that. If you're like a WWE fan, you wouldn't really know the behind the scenes wrestling of, the business and all the other schools and companies. So leaving WWE, you open up to such a whole new world. The next year must have been huge for you. Chavo Guerrero, Hoovy, you must have had a huge, I want to say build up to the year, coming to you. You wrestled in the Philippines, JDL you fought. How did all that like feel, coming in the year, getting all these contracts, getting all these deals? Matches.
I mean, it just in a way it was kind of new, because the independents weren't like this before. Like I guess like people have to understand, like before WWE, like there was a short window where I was out of TNA and like kind of free, like a year or less. And I didn't really do much during that time. I was kind of like taking time off and only picking and choosing certain projects. Evolve was one of them. I would go to Mexico, like over the border, and do border shows or something like that. I didn't do a lot of stuff. But, before WWE, it was like 4 years in TNA. And before that, it was like a year or two in Ring of Honor. And before that, it was like, a year doing Lucha Libre USA, the MTV show. It only lasted a few seasons. So, I had almost kind of spent like 10 years not really having the freedom to do a lot of indies and stuff. And like back in 2009, 2010, when I was more of an indie guy at that time, it wasn't like this. Like guys didn't have like merch the way they do now. The social media didn't exist in the same way. It was still smaller. And a lot of indies hadn't really become really good in the entrepreneurial sense, like they hadn't grown and found their own niche and like a way to kind of be like standalone, successful. Like a lot of places were still kind of, fly by night, and they could be gone the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So this new world of independent wrestling that had its own system and its own, like, it was so big, like I've never seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of ways it was new, but in a lot of ways it was comfortable. It felt like home because, almost at every turn, I never planned on signing anything to stay anywhere, like ever, like even like since like all the way back in like Ring of Honor. And so like I was trying to like get better because at a certain point I was like homeless or whatever. But each place I would go, I never really planned on staying necessarily for too long. You just kind of end up doing it, And every time I thought, it'd be nice to kind of just get out and explore and be able to do all these new things that are coming up. And then I just, I end up staying in one spot. So it was nice because there was all these things that I could do that I just didn't, hadn't really seen before. I mean, as far as like working with guys like Chavo, Hoovy and all that, of course, those are like dreams come true because these guys are like heroes to me and big brothers to me in a way. But I've wrestled a lot of those like caliber guys like my whole life, like ever since I was a teenager. So like, that's not necessarily a culture shock to me to work with them. It's more of like a personal enjoyment sort of thing because, I still very much look up to these guys, but yeah, I mean, there's been times when I was younger and I'd wrestle Jeff Hardy or whoever. And it's just like, you grow up with that. It becomes a little bit kind of normal. But it was just really nice to be able to go and do all these things and to see that, like I've done a good job, I guess, of kind of building myself as an entity and being able to promote myself as opposed to being part of a banner that has to promote me.
Mm-hmm. One thing I have noticed, and you say it a lot, and I don't know how I feel about it because that's your own feeling towards yourself. You say a lot of people boo you. A lot of people may not like you when you wrestle. I've been MLW, New Japan, Impact. I've been in a lot of places where you've been, and I've been hearing a lot of cheering, more less than booing. So have you felt like a different atmosphere from WWE to all these other companies, from fans?
I think that there's a lot of carryover in some ways. I joke a lot, like I'll joke with my friends a lot, like when we're in the locker rooms, like at Indies and or like at New Japan and stuff like that I'm like, like an independent Roman Reigns because like there's this like polarizing thing where I'm not going to these places and being a bad guy, and then there's a lot of people that, again, like a lot of people irrationally love me and a lot of people irrationally hate me, and then the people who irrationally love me like irrationally build up that love, and it's just like, whoa, I'm not that great, but thank you for the support. And then on the other side, it's like people irrationally tear me down further, and then it's like, they invent stuff about you like to justify their hatred, and it's like, well, I'm not that bad either. So it's like, there's two elements to it, and you're kind of like in between. But that's honestly like that's like the perfect recipe for a performer, because you can kind of, if you have all the tools and like the experience and the IQ for it, you can use that to do a lot of things. Like, for example, I'll go back to like New Japan, and the USA shows is a mixed bag. Some places they'll really love me, and some places they'll really hate me, and sometimes they'll really hate me for the wrong reasons too. But even in that sense, like Manhattan, like when we were in Manhattan, it was very fiery. I'm sure the 90-minute delay on the show didn't help. Everybody was pretty angry anyway. But being the first out of the gate and having, a crowd that was very, very like heavily against me, that's fine, because that gives me an opportunity to make a hero out of Ren Narita, and I enjoy that. And that's something I kind of learned from watching Kobe Bryant. Like a lot of people really, like, I've never seen somebody so irrationally cut down from people in a critic aspect, like in my life. But he handles it in such a way that, he can just like an orchestra. He can just play, like he can move fan bases one way or another, draw you in, push you away, tear you down when he wants to and build you up. Like he's more of a performer than a player, or was more of a performer than a player in some ways that people even realize. And just, he had a lot of mental strength. So like having that mental strength gives me the ability to then know how to use it and to navigate it. So, it's a unique thing, but But that's the way it is. And I think a lot of people, again, I'm coming from an entity, being a WWE, you're playing for the biggest team, you're playing for the Yankees. So like what they see you do there, the last thing you do, that's their impression of you. So I spent the last 2 years there being a bad guy, and they hate me and they hated me. And a lot of people only know me from that. So when I go out, they don't know the 15 years before that, like the struggle that led to that. And they certainly don't know me as a person. They don't know that, I'm not an abrasive person, and I am a soft spoken and patient person or whatever. But, so you kind of have to expect that they're going to react to you the way that they've seen you presented for a couple of years. So that's the other thing to it.
All right. Well, that's a good, idea for people to understand. I mean, that's something that I need to, think about and understand too, since, I'm really one-sided in this.
Well, I appreciate the support, Eric.
Of course.
But yeah, it's a lot of ingredients to it.
Let's talk about, your success after leaving. You won titles, House of Glory, Crown Jewel champion, you Lucha Vavoom champion. You won a tournament. And it was a British tournament. I don't know if it was like a huge cup. I saw a picture. You had like
Maryland's Cup.
Yeah. You won an award against Damian Slater. You had like a Australian. They gave you like a plate and like a flag.
Yeah, match of the year for
Tell me all that. Tell me like all those titles, all the success. How did that feel coming in?
Honestly, except for maybe one or two of those things, I kind of forgot about a lot of them. I don't know. I've never had a goal like for that sort of thing. Like I know it'll come up sometimes in the way I'll express myself, like for the fans. But like for example, I used to say I want to be the first Filipino Intercontinental Champion. And it's not that I don't want that. Of course you do, and I would love that, but that's not really a goal for me. I just want to make people happy and my community happy, my fans happy. So like that's something for them. So if I can make that happen, then that makes them happy. If I don't get that, I'm not disappointed, because that's not really what I'm shooting for. So any of these things that come up, like I don't usually keep track of, because,
good thing I do.
I'm not aiming for it, but I think in a way it's nice because it kind of validates you, because you're not trying to do these things. And sometimes I try to avoid these things, and it's like they insist, like no, like this is a position we would like you to do, and it's validating because you're able to play that position for them. And all these things that we do, they're different positions, and they all require very specific skills. Guys who are presented as winners all the time, sometimes they can't help other performers. They're just simply not good enough. They don't have the tools to do that. But then sometimes guys that do help other performers, they're great utility guys. They don't have the tools to almost be selfish enough, like to kind of be a star, like to accept that and to be able to shoulder all that. They're not good enough to do that. So not every position is capable of playing the other positions. And so, usually, I can do a little bit of everything. So when I get in those like positions are presented to me, it's validating, because it just says to me that my toolbox can handle that. And that's what they identify in me. Like, hey, you can do this. And so it's like, okay, that's nice. But yeah, I mean, Lucha Vavoom, I'm still their champion. House of Glory, that's really great, because that's like a really, really like wrestling community, and with Amazing Red and BXL and all these guys, like they're very like diehard wrestling. So to be a banner carrier for a place like that is pretty cool, as far as like the diehard community for wrestling goes, especially in New York, and getting a match of the year, stuff like that. I think there's a couple of those that I got, and winning tournaments and cups and things like that. It's just, it's a nice thing, because even guys that leave WWE, they don't get tapped for those positions. You only kind of do that if they feel like you have a lot left. Usually that's for people going up. Like if you leave a place like a strong team, like a WWE or something like that, they don't just give you that if they feel like you're on like your farewell tour, so to speak, or if you're just coasting. So it says to me that they think very highly of what I have to offer, still. So that's pretty cool.
All right. So let's go to Impact now because I have a lot of questions. As a big
Yeah.
fan, even to this day, I still don't know when did you truly debut as Suicide and then into Manic, or did you come in as Manic? I'm trying to figure out exactly what year you came into Impact, like the original contract happened. Because I know you did Puma for a while. I know you were always there as Puma.
Yeah.
So when did like they tell you, all right? Because I know the story of how you said, let me be the guy under the mask instead of Frankie and Daniels. Let me do it because they got their thing
Right.
going on. But like, what year did you actually like put on the actual suit and all that?
God, I think that was 2012 or 13. I was definitely Suicide by 2013. I
Mm-hmm.
want to. I'm not sure the first. I think the first date was 2013, maybe the springtime, something like that. It was when they brought it back, and there was a three-way match with Joey Ryan and Petey Williams on Impact,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll never forget it because life works in mysterious ways, and I had spent all those years being kind of at rock bottom, and I was in Tampa at the time,
Mm-hmm.
like the homeless stuff, all that stuff, and it was a long process trying to get back on my feet and getting back to LA, and then going to Lucha Libre USA, which led to Ring of Honor, which led back to TNA. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember getting back to TNA was really kind of like, okay, now I'm back to where I was before I kind of like got knocked all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget it because it was like, I think my last shows for Ring of Honor, one of my last shows was in Tampa area. It was in St. Pete.
Mm-hmm.
And my first show for TNA was, and they were traveling at this time. Remember, they weren't in Orlando anymore. They, generally speaking, they were doing, it was like AEW is now, like they were doing arenas.
Yeah.
And it just so happened the first one back was in Tampa, and I
Mm-hmm.
just remember thinking like, and then again like the Cruiserweight Classic Orlando, like there's just like a cosmic link to me in Florida, and I just remember we were at the Sun Arena or whatever that is in Tampa. That was the match. Petey Williams and Joey Ryan, and Suicide was kind of like re-debuting. It was like had been on a hiatus for a little bit. There were bumpers for weeks. There was Suicide's coming. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what you were talking about. Like I was sitting at home. I had come in and done, I think, a pay-per-view as Puma prior to that. And they said, okay, we really would like to hang on to you. I said, okay, great. They just said, we'll just wait until we see what the right fit is for you. We're waiting. A few weeks go by, I see these bumpers. I called them. I said, look, because I knew they had a rotating door of Suicide. They were always kind of like, I don't want to say they were disappointed because like Suicide as a brand, like for TNA, became a solid cornerstone for their company. Like from an image standpoint, when you think of TNA, I mean, there's a handful of things you think of. You think of AJ. You might think of Jeff Jarrett, Abyss, maybe Sting,
Mm-hmm.
and Kurt, maybe Jeff Hardy. Like there's a short list of things you think of, like the image in your head is synonymous with TNA. You think of the X Division title, and I think Suicide became an image that's like it's very TNA,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they're disappointed in it, but I think that they wish they had more stability because there was always a new guy playing the role, and it was always somebody that had something else going on that was probably better for them.
Yeah.
Because Frankie Kazarian is better as Frankie Kazarian.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Daniels is better as Christopher Daniels. And I'm probably better as myself, but they wanted somebody to kind of be able to do it steadily and dedicate themselves to it and give it a certain look and feel. And I don't think they ever really got that from the other guys. And the other guys were heavyweights too, So like they played it a different way. And I kind of gave it that Spider-Man Deadpool type of feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember like from the first show, they were like, this is what we had always envisioned it being.
Mm-hmm.
And so, then from that point on, I just hit the ground running. So,
Well, yeah, I think it was the right time at the right moment because you were already wearing a mask as Puma during some time at that point. So I thought it was perfect. For now,
yeah,
since you were also really young at the time. I mean,
yeah,
you started a whole career. So there's a new Suicide, and I'm not gonna make any ideas or hypotheses. I did tell my friend that like Impact wouldn't be Impact without Suicide. I think the character was created for the show. did you train suicide during? Because there were some moves recently at Rebellion that were your kind of moves, but I know it's someone else under the mask because they got someone else doing it. Did you train the new suicide? Is that someone?
No. Although I do know the new suicide. But no, it's just I think it's just by virtue of being around the guy that I guess became the most notable suicide. They it gave us an opportunity to kind of do some similar things, and so I just think it was more like my presence or just being working with me in those aspects, like kind of rubbed off on them a little bit, so that the similarity shine through. Otherwise, they probably have a lot of different creative freedom to come up with stuff that wouldn't otherwise happen. But it's like playing with me as a teammate. A lot of me is going to shine through, I guess. So that was that. Yeah.
All right, guys. If you like that video, please subscribe, like, comment, and part 2 will be out this Sunday. We're going to talk about Impact Wrestling, ROH, New Japan Pro Wrestling. What's next for TJP? Where is he going to go after the COVID? Find out the next video, part 2, this Sunday.